All right. Welcome to this presentation called Tips and Tricks in Unity. My name is Bjørnar, and I'm a technical artist at Krillblade Studio here at Hamar. And yeah, we worked on games like Among the Sleep and The Plan, which is a small mini game that we made. We're currently working on Mosaic, which is our new project, and I've also done a bunch of Game Jam games. I'm going to be talking about how we work in Unity and how we have made tools to make things easier for ourselves, and also a few things you can use to make things easier for you. Some of it will be basic, and some of it will be for people who have some experience with Unity already. So I'm just going to jump straight into it with a very basic thing, using the grid. If you're making a game and you're not using the grid, then you're doing something, I wouldn't necessarily say wrong, but it's dangerous, and you will get problems because of it. If you make sure that most objects are like exactly 1 meter high or 2 meter high, or at least that you know how tall an object should be in a certain situation, you can work with the expectation that it's going to be that high, and that makes it a lot easier to work quickly in big environments. For example, here I have these wall modules that are all 1 meter wide, and by using snapping tools I can easily extend this, and since I know that the wall is 1 meter wide and that I'm snapping to 1 meter increments, which I can set, I'm not sure if you can see this very well, but I've set the snapping to 1 meter, that I know that I can extend the wall without getting any gaps in the wall here. And another thing in Unity is that there's no hotkey no quick way to do snapping. You have this window, but I don't like clicking buttons with my mouse, so I tend to use hotkeys for pretty much anything I can. So something you should do if you work a lot in the Unity editor is to create a script that will snap the object to the grid when you press a key. So for example, I bound that to Alt-D, and that will just make sure that everything snaps in place, which combined with Unity's snapping tools makes it easy to clean up your scene and to kind of fix things after you've just quickly blocked them out. It also makes it easy to change big parts of the environment very quickly, at least when using modules like this. I've made a set for all the different kinds of walls in the game, and let's see, I can make this bigger. And then we also made this tool called the Prefab Replacer, which allows us to swap out a lot of objects at once. So if we wanted to change all of these to doors, for example, I could just go to here. This is a window with many slots for various objects, and I can assign this 1 meter door module, nice and pink. It's been a while since we worked in this project. I can just assign that down here and select the objects I want to replace and hit replace. And these are now all doors. And in addition, these doors are missing door frames, for example. So I can duplicate them, and I think we have a door frame prefab here. Let's see. I hope this works. Yeah. So now I replaced all the duplicated ones. Since I know that these are set up with the correct rotations and everything, I can just replace all these with door frames, and it's all set up and aligns perfectly. And I can add doors and other objects in the same way. Now this didn't actually work as well as it should. And that's because these had different pivot points. With this one, it's half a meter out to the side, because doors are usually not clumped into the corners like this would be. They tend to have some space from the wall, so yeah. So I've used prefabs now. Prefabs are a very important part of working in Unity. They're kind of, yeah, as the name indicates, they're prefabricated collections of objects. Like you can, instead of dragging a model out without a texture, you can, let's see, we have this wine bottle. When you drag the model out, it's into the scene. It's blank. It has no texture. But if you assign the texture to it and you want to save that and you reuse it later, you can just yeah, do everything you want to do in the scene and then just drag it into the project view. That will kind of save that configuration. And you can also add lights and other scripts to this object, and it will all be stored. And colliders, for example. So all of these here are prefabs, and that makes it possible for me to change this in one place. Let's see. And it should then change all instances without me having to do something, a repetitive task many times. So this is a huge time saver when working on big scenes, and you can change everything very quickly if you've got everything set up correctly. So they're also kind of dangerous in a way, because if you make a mistake in one of these, then that change can propagate to all the other instances as well, and suddenly everything is broken. And also, when you update a prefab, it will only update values on the other prefabs that have not been modified from the base prefab. So when you drag a prefab into the scene, it will use all the default values, and if you change one value, for example, the material, and you make the change only on this copy, when you update the master prefab in the project, the one that you edited manually will not be updated. Why is this window? So that's one of the things that you need to keep in mind when working with prefabs. Have many people here worked in Unity? Yeah, good. Something that can save you a lot of time is extending the default editors in Unity. So, for example, this is our transform editor, because an editor is basically just the GUI part of a script. So all the scripts and components in Unity all have their built-in editors, and we modified the transform editor to have buttons for resetting positions, as that's something you do very often. So you can just click this button and it will reset. Same with rotation and scale. And we also added various buttons here that really speed things up when you're working. Because Oftentimes you'll want to select the parent of a game object, so we have a button here for that. You can also create a child of the game object just by pushing a button there, or open the Prefab Replacer tool that we have down here. So extending an editor is really simple. Is anyone here not familiar with how to do it? Or have anyone here done it themselves? No? Okay. So I'm not gonna go too much into detail here, but and you can find a lot of info on this just by Googling custom editor in Unity, and that will give you a step-by-step guide for it. But for the mesh renderer editor, which controls the materials, for example, all you have to do is create a class called mesh renderer editor. I think this can be called anything you want, but as long as you add this custom editor type of mesh renderer, then it will override or extend the default editor in Unity. So here we added buttons for reversing the material list. So if we add some extra here, because sometimes when you import a mesh, when you have made changes to mesh and re-import it, sometimes the material IDs will reverse or shift. So it's very tedious to have to go in and do this manually and change this. So just by pushing reverse, we could just flip that easily and not waste time doing repetitive work. And shift will just kind of move everything in the list down and put the last one to the top again. You can also make editors for scripts that you create yourself. Like we have a... Oh, beautiful. So now I think this crashed because the object didn't have a collider, which should have been added automatically. Okay, I'll have to kill it then. But yeah, many times when you make a script yourself, it will have a ton of inputs and variables to tweak, but it's not always, you don't always have to see all of them at once, or some of them should only be visible in certain contexts, and then you can create some logic for that in the script and decide that when this setting is active, then you should only see a certain set of inputs for that script. Let's see if I can do this properly now. So, yeah, again, this is probably too small for you to see. But this is a fog script that we made, and it has an editor that changes, well, it's only a minor change, but based on the type of fog, you will see a slightly different editor because they need different settings. And we also have buttons for copying the fog settings to and from the active camera, and yeah, things like that. It's very, very useful to be able to create buttons here to simplify your workflow. And another useful thing in Unity is the asset importer, which you can use to automatically set the import settings when you import a mesh, for example. So in this project, we have an asset. If you make a script that's called onModelImport, and let's see, yeah, and make it an asset post processor, then you can decide what to do with the object on import, because not all objects need to have animation, for example. So you can check that if model importer dot when else is it done this? Well, dot name, you can check the name for example, if the name begins with animation, you can set it to automatically enable animation and the type of compression you want to use and the type of animation you want to use. But for objects that do not begin with the name animation, you can just skip that part and, for example, set the scale to 1 instead, which is something that we did here, because all of the meshes coming from Blender and 3D Studio Max were 100 times smaller than they should be when working in the correct sizes there. So we set all the scales, import scale to 1 for all meshes. And in this case, we also turned all animation compression off. So using that you can use that for textures and models, and I think pretty much anything you can import. And if you find yourself going into the import settings for objects a lot and setting things manually, then it's probably a good thing to look into using the on-model import or asset processor in Unity. So we've made a bunch of custom editor tools, and most of them are pretty basic. Like, they're just a collection of snippets of scripts that will simplify a repetitive thing. Over the course of the project, I accumulated a lot of buttons in this editor window, which is kind of just my bucket where I put anything. And here there are tools for resetting the position of a game object to 0, which is something you'll do many, many times, probably. It sounds pretty... It can sound pretty useless, but it's very... This is going here and typing 0, 0, 0 is something you'll end up doing a lot, unless you have a button for it. And same for rotation and scale. And another very useful small thing here is the copy transform script, which allows me to copy the position of one object and then go to another and paste that there, so they are now in exactly the same place. This, combined with working on the grid, is very, very powerful and can let you change huge parts of the environment very quickly. I can see if... So I can, for example, if I want more chairs to lie down here, or if I want something else to lie down, I can copy the transform of this chair. So I have a hotkey for that, and I can paste that in. Let's see. And not all objects will align perfectly, at least not in our case, because we were a bit sloppy, and not all objects point in the same direction. But if you... they should always be off by just 90 degrees if you've done it sort of right. So then you can just snap it. Because again, in the snap setting, setting the rotation snap to 90 degrees, for me, I found is the most useful. Because objects will most often be offset by that amount. Another useful button is the swap location tool, or just the swap button. When working with scenes, often you'll find yourself rearranging the environment to fit the design, and just being able to swap. See, these don't have the same rotations, but if they had, then it would have been possible to just do this, and it's just a simple thing that copies, or yeah, it switches out their positions. And yeah, we have the Prefab Replacer that I've used a little bit already, which makes swapping out big parts of the environment a breeze. We have the Crap Finder, as it's beautifully named, which is just a collection of scripts that allow you to find like shadow casting lights or extremely big triggers that shouldn't be that big. Pretty much anything. When optimizing a scene, you need to find the culprits, and like shadow casting lights with huge radiuses can be found with that tool, for example. And just making tools for yourself that can find objects based on certain criteria can be very useful. We also have a quick renamer tool, which allows you to select a bunch of game objects. Like here I have a few light switches selected, and let's see, when I rename this, I can choose a new name, light, I can add a space switch, and I can just add, yeah, it's tiny, numbers. So I can automatically increment the numbers for it, for example. Or insert the parent's name into this name, or I can also use a simple find and replace renaming, which also makes it a lot easier to do big, to organize your scene in a quick way without having to like manually rename many objects. Or you can change the names of many objects at once in Unity, but you don't get them numbered correctly, and it's a bit of a hassle. We also have this script called the physics debugger, which helped us a lot. It's a bit slow, so I'm a bit curious how this will run on this computer. But basically what it does is it disables all the mesh renderers in the scene, and instead it renders the colliders, which makes it very easy to debug the colliders in the scene and find problems with them, where like holes in the world or small edges where there shouldn't be any. So if I enable that, this is how the world looks to the physics engine. So one example is there are many invisible colliders in a game after we worked on it for a while, so it's very handy to be able to debug it. Like here, for example, it doesn't look like there's anything here, but if I enable it, you can see, yeah, this is slow, but here we actually have invisible walls preventing the player from escaping the playground too early, and that's something that would be, for a programmer, for example, who worked on something here, if he suddenly couldn't raycast here or something like that, then he could use the physics debugger tool and realize that, oh, there's an invisible wall here. And also for floors and stuff that has to be aligned correctly, it's very, very useful to be able to see the world like this. This is a tool that we made. It's one of our programmers, so I'm not the one who wrote this, but it's been very nice, and we might actually put this up on the asset store if there's not anything like this. But yeah, that's another part. did many of you, or did any of you go to the Unity talk a couple of days ago? Because he did talk a bit about the asset store, and the asset store is something that you should be using for some things. You can find almost complete projects there, and meshes and everything. That's things that you should be making on your own, unless you're throwing together a prototype. But recognizing what tools you shouldn't spend time writing yourself is rather important. And for example, the Shader Forge plugin is extremely useful. That's from the asset store, and that's something you. If something from the asset store saves you a lot of time, then you should consider getting it. Have anyone here used Shader Forge at all? It's especially if you know how to make shaders beforehand, then Shader Forge will save you a lot of time. Just you don't have to rewrite or copy and paste functions anymore. You can just create, just drag and drop nodes. So if you worked with materials in Unreal, for example, then this is very familiar. So that's probably if you get one thing from the asset store, I would suggest getting this one. I think it's a bit pricey, but it's easily worth it if you're going to make a lot of shaders. And then more tools that we use from the asset store is a tool called Advanced Builder. For the longest time, we would manually build the game for both Windows and Mac and Linux, and that was a process that would take at least an hour just to get the builds out, and then we'd have to zip them and organize them. So using Advanced Builder allows you to export to many different platforms using just one click. So it's a big time saver. We also recently started using a plugin called Amplify Color, which is a color correction tool that is very easy to customize, or very easy to get exactly what you want, because it uses color lookup tables instead of just like we did in Among the Sleep, just a basic color correction curve on the camera, which would basically do the same as a curves adjustment in Photoshop. But the Amplify Color will, let's see if I can find it here. I'm not used to working on this computer. So we need the camera. So what Amplify Color does is it creates a lookup table for the colors, which means you can decide to affect only red colors, for example, in the scene, instead of doing the same adjustment to all the different colors, if that makes sense. Let's see. So what it does is it takes a screenshot of the scene, with this small, I'm sorry. Yeah, it saves a screenshot of the scene with a small square up in the corner with color correction data, and then you can edit the photo or a screenshot in Photoshop, and any color changes you do will be usable in-game by that tool. I didn't get much sleep tonight. Let's see. We have this camera. yeah, opening Photoshop is good. Yeah, I don't have to go into detail there, but if you're using any kind of color correction in your game and rely on that, then you should check out Amplify Color. It's very, very powerful and a lot more versatile than just using the default built-in color correction tools in Unity. Because I think there's the color correction ramp, which is the one we used for Among the Sleep, where all you do is you have this grayscale or tinted ramp that will affect the entire image in the same way. And the build reporter is another tool that is useful unless your project is becoming very big, because then it will crash. It lists all assets in your project that are used or not used for every scene, and you can also see, like, if audio takes up a lot of space, you'll see that, and also if your textures are taking up a lot of space. So it's a good way to optimize the project and find out where you can reduce the size of builds. But when the project becomes big, it takes several minutes just to compile the list of objects that are used or not used, and it will just stop working. So we couldn't use that in the end. But for smaller projects, it's a very useful tool, Build Reporter. So a little bit about working in a team. In the beginning, we used Dropbox for our Unity projects, which turned out to be very bad. So you get very many conflicted files, and it's a very unreliable way to do things. So now we have switched to using Git for version control, which is a bit more complicated, and it's a bit more it takes a bit more time to get files actually up to the server, but it takes care of cases where people have uploaded or worked on the same files, and it's possible to you rarely lose work when you use Git, unless you mess up in some way, which can be pretty easy. But usually you can very easily restore backups or decide what to do in cases where people have conflicting copies and worked on the same files. So something that can't be handled by Git very easily is the Unity scenes. So for Among the Sleep, we created a small script called the Scene Locker, which just puts a lock here. And if you work on a scene, you can lock it. It won't prevent other people from working on it, but it will tell everyone else that you are now working in this scene, and if other people work in it, they should expect their work to be erased, or that they should be they need to merge it in later. What it does is it writes a file to our local server, and every, I think, 5 seconds, the script will check that folder on the server and see if this scene is currently locked. So it's not working here right now because I don't have access to that server. And of course, when you're working in a team, you should communicate. It's not really a Unity tip, but it's very important, and will get you away from or it will avoid most problems. And that's what I had for the presentations. Are there any questions related to the tools or how we worked? Yeah.
Use Git for scripts, like files and then how to read. How will Git handle
How will Git handle
conflicts in like project files?
like textures? Yeah, so the question is how Git will handle conflicts in, for example, textures as opposed to scripts, which can easily be merged. So Git, for Among the Sleep, we had two separate repositories, one for scripts and another for everything else. And in the one with everything in it, you can't merge them, so you have to just choose between one or the other. And we recently started using the text-based file format in Unity, which makes it possible to merge scenes, and you don't have to choose one or the other always. But it's a bit dangerous, because if people have changed things many places in the scene, then it's very hard for Unity or for Git to figure out what to keep and which version to use. But yeah, we had our separate repository for scripts. Question back there? Yeah. Yeah, it should be, yeah, especially now that Unity 5 became completely free. There's no limitations on the image effects and that stuff anymore. So that's usable there. Yeah, it's the Amplify Color tool. As I mentioned, it's very, very flexible and allows you to really control the colors exactly how you want. So check it out. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, we had some problems converting the project from 4 to 5. Among the Sleep, we didn't really intend to upgrade to Unity 5, but it turned out that in order to get it onto the PS4, we kind of have to. So, so we started upgrading, and I think. Well, I wasn't the one who did this, but from what I heard, it was rather simple, because Unity takes care of most of the simple, tedious cases that you have to fix. But there were some systems, and these were systems from the asset store, for example. This is an example of problems related to that. I think we had some issues with a JSON system, or for a JSON plugin for handling JSON files that we used for the localization editor, which was not updated for Unity 5. So when we updated, we had to scrap that, and that, you basically have to wait until the assets or the plugins from the asset store are updated if you use them. But I can't really speak to specific problems that we had. I can't remember, but it's pretty straightforward. And Unity takes, as mentioned, care of most of the things you have to fix. Yes. All right. Then thank you for listening. And if there's anything, just grab me. I'll sit right there. So, thank you.